What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is the Blacklist Season 10, Episode 16, Blair Foster. So this one was pretty straightforward. As soon as Red gave them the name of this lawyer, I kind of had a feeling it was going to tie in somehow with whatever Dorf and Hudson were doing, and sure enough, it tied into Dorf and something she did for him in the past. It's the typical Blacklist way, where it feels like, oh, he's just giving us a powerful blacklister that's going to help us and help make the task force look good, and in reality it's actually helping them in a different way than they were expecting. So pretty straightforward. I did like how at the end, whenever Foster contacted Hudson, there was that moment where she contacts him, because of course in my mind I'm thinking, okay, but Hudson is not done, and in fact, as he was saying, it just further confirms his theories about this task force. So when she contacts him, I'm like, okay, so this is how he's going to be able to still have a bit of a foothold and still be a somewhat dangerous foe for the task force. But I also had the thought, he seems to be a straight and narrow kind of guy. He doesn't seem the type that's going to use somebody like Blair Foster to get at them. And so I'm really glad that right after I have that thought, he basically tells her, we don't play the game the same way. It's good for them to make him not only, I guess, capable of going against the task force and give him an option to use against them, but still show that he's not willing to compromise his values to try to take them down. And I think that's what makes him a bit more of a dangerous foe for them, is that the fact that he isn't corrupt. He's not somebody that is going to bend the lines to go after them. Now, granted, that is going to hinder him in some ways, but it's not somebody that Reddington can just use his contacts and go, aha, I found this secret dirty thing about your past, and just take him out of the picture like he did with Dorf in this one. So that's, I think, the most difficult thing for him is going to be the fact that he's not going to find a whole lot of help, that Reddington won't be able to get out of the picture somehow. So he's going to be doing a lot of it on his own unless he accepts help from less than desirable or less than trustworthy sources. And that's going to be where it's going to be, I feel, going to be the most interesting to see, where is he going to go from here? What is going to be his next step? Is he actually going to find a way to get at that task force, or is it going to be he's just going to be punching at air constantly and just constantly just running into that brick wall of, nope, you're not doing anything successful here. You're just going to be stopped at every turn. But outside of that, though, some of the other little things happening, we of course see Wrestler still at the NA meetings. He still is talking to this one guy. The guy is still not played in hardly at all. And while Foster coming to see him at the NA meeting and offering him like a congressman role and all of that, I don't know if that's going to play in later on down the line. It felt like a very important scene that was just sort of glossed over. So I don't know if that's going to come back later or not, but the guy that Wrestler's been sponsoring, we still see nothing really important for him. So I don't really know if he's going to play in at all. We're getting kind of close to the end of the season here, and it feels like if he was going to be an important character, we would have already seen maybe him being involved in something related to what's going on with Hudson, with the Blacklist, all of that stuff. But at the moment, he's still just sort of there. So not really sure what's happening there. And then, of course, we see Reddington going down to Cuba, talking to Manny, and we see that he leaves a note for Weecha that we never get to read. So I don't know what that's supposed to be. I don't know if that's going to play into however the end of the season is going to come to a close. Maybe something to do with Hudson. I'm not entirely sure. But that's one of those moments that you see him do it. You see him leave some note there that we don't get to see what the note was. And you just know it's going to come back later, and you're kind of waiting for that moment of, all right, so what did he say? And it's funny because it just made me think of Arrow in there's an episode where Oliver says something, or he's talking to Laurel right before she dies, and they don't show us the full conversation. So of course in my mind I'm thinking, well, that's going to be important somehow, right? And then we cut back to it later, and she just basically tells him, you can't do this on your own. Like, why was this kept a secret from the audience? Because that's not important at all. So I'm just, every single time something like that happens where you see somebody do something that is not explained to the audience or does not get read or anything along those lines, anytime you have those moments, it always just makes me think back to that moment in Arrow and how completely wasted that moment was, because it's like there's no reason to hide it from the audience. Whereas in the Blacklist, almost every single time that something happens and you don't see the end of it, or you don't hear the message or whatever on that, I guess, line of thought, anytime that happens, it almost always is, no, there's something happening in the back. There's something cooking behind the scenes that we don't get to see until near the end, and then we get to see how it all sort of came together. So just a fun little side note there. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's a solid enough episode. Nothing too surprising. I guess in the sense of this is season 10, you would kind of hope for something a little different, a little bit more interesting. But as it is, it's a pretty standard Blacklist episode, so it is what it is. I enjoy it fine enough, but I would like to see maybe a few changes to the formula now that we're getting close to the end of the series. But then again, it's been working for 9 other seasons for the most part, so why change it now, right? But with that being said, on to the next episode. I'll see you there in a minute. And now episode 17, the Screw You, It's Morgana, Not Morgana Logistics Corporation. I just want to go ahead and get that out of the way right off the bat. So this one, it was okay. There were definitely some good things and some bad things. The bad stuff, start with the very first scene. I mean, it's one of those, they're trying to build up this intense moment, this tense scene of, oh no, Reddington is sleeping, he's in danger, somebody's sneaking in. The problem is, you can very clearly tell it's Ouija from her silhouette. Like, there's no question to me who that is. And yet they still spent probably a good minute and a half on that scene until the reveal. At least that's what it may have been, a bit shorter, may have been a bit longer, I don't know. But it just felt kind of unnecessary. But whatever, just a small little opening scene. The episode as a whole, I thought was actually pretty well set up. With this whole logistics company and what they're doing and the mystery behind it. However, there's one element of it that I was expecting to pay off at the end of the episode that did not. And that was everything to do with Dembe. Because we see Reddington asking for his assistance as a bodyguard. We see them just sort of hanging out, seemingly doing nothing that important. And then we get to the end, and Reddington is revealed to be the one who started the Morgana Logistics Corporation. Very clever payoff. I did have a suspicion that Reddington was connected to them in some way, because they sounded like the type of corporation that he would use in the past. I mean, they're able to ship stuff basically under the radar. It sounds like something Reddington would need for his whole organization. But to find out he's the one that started it, I thought was pretty clever. I thought it was a nice little plot twist at the end. However, it now reshapes everything that Dembe and him were doing this episode. He asked for Dembe's help because he wanted to keep Dembe away from the FBI task force. Because if he was there, he would have been able to just say, wait a minute, that's Reddington's corporation. He's the one that started that. Why is he sending you guys after them? It would have shaped how the task force went after them. So to not have Dembe there, it now made it to where they don't know what they're chasing down. They don't realize the scope of what they're about to take down. And also, they're not sitting there going, why would Reddington send us after his own corporation? So I like that setup. I like how they played with that. And I expected there to be some payoff at the end of this episode. And then there was not. There was no moment of Dembe comes back and, oh yeah, you missed a big one today. We took down this giant corporation. Oh, who was it? Morgana. Wait a minute, that's Reddington's, or that's Raymond's. Like, none of that happened. And it feels kind of wasted, in my opinion, because now they would be wondering, wait a minute, why is he sending us after his own corporation? It's one thing to send us after a competitor, somebody that may have been working against his corporation that shipped stuff, but he just sent us after his own, something that he created. Why would he do that? Why would he send us after them? And it would start to raise some questions about, what is he truly doing? Is he trying to disrupt his whole organization? I asked this question before, but with Liz out of the picture to not take over his organization, what's his plan for it? Is he planning to just disband it so nobody can have access to it? This kind of suggests possibly. But to not have Dembe show up and ask these questions and him find out about it, it kind of feels like there's I don't know, that payoff. Yes, the moment at the end whenever he shows up and they're having the party and all of that stuff. That moment is kind of like, oh, it was his the whole time. Like it's kind of a nice little aha moment. But you look past that, you don't get to see the moment when the team finds out. Now, I'm assuming they'll probably find out eventually, but I wanted to see that moment at the end of this. It would have felt like a nice little wrap up, but they don't do that. And on top of that, something else that it does bring up in my mind that will maybe make a previous scene a little less impactful is Weecha's scene. The moment whenever she was given the note. I assume there was going to be something more to that. I assume there was going to be a deeper meaning to that. Based on what I'm seeing in this episode now, it kind of makes me wonder, did he send her the note as kind of a booty call? And then that was his, oh, somebody snuck in to get Dembe to join him as a bodyguard, so that way he could send the team after the Morgana Logistics Corporation. If that's the case, if that's the only reason he gave that note to Weecha was there was an intruder in my house to the team, I feel like that's kind of pointless because you don't need to have her sneak in. You could have just, oh, Harold, somebody snuck in, but I dealt with them, don't worry. You could have lied about it. So to make it like a half-truth, like somebody did sneak in, but it was Weecha, so it wasn't really an intruder, it feels like that note to Weecha could have been more meaningful, could have been more impactful, but instead it's just, booty call, which sets up for another thing that I could have just lied about completely. I feel like it's just a bit of a wasted moment, I suppose. But with all that being said, the good stuff in this episode is definitely everything to do with Hudson. And obviously, like I said, the plot twist with Reddington being the one behind Morgana. But Hudson, his story is definitely taking an interesting turn now, because not only are his theories starting to be proven possibly true, now he's got the Reddington connection. And of course, from the outside, not seeing what the team does, not seeing how the team operates, it does sort of seem like Reddington might just be controlling them. And in some areas, he kind of does. There is a bit of truth to what Hudson's finding out, but there obviously is a lot of good that the team is doing as well that is not going to be as apparent from the outside looking in. Now then again, you could argue that, well, you could look at the arrests that have been made, all the cases that have been solved. You could look at that and say, those are the good things that should be able to be seen. But of course, from his mind, he doesn't like people who play from outside, basically bending the rules too much. And for him, working with Reddington, even if he's supposed to be a CI, even if he's giving them these cases, I don't think he's going to be able to wrap his head around it. Even if the work that they're doing is good, it's quality work, it's putting bad people away, in his mind, the way he's been shown to function so far, I don't feel like he would be able to look at what the task force is doing, even if they were not helping Reddington, which we know they have a little bit. But even if they weren't helping him, I don't think he'd be able to wrap his mind around the idea of he is the FBI's most wanted. And we're really just, oh yeah, sure, work with us and you get immunity, which of course now he doesn't have anymore. So I don't know. It's a very interesting setup, and I feel like Hudson is a good, I guess, villain, you put it in quotations, because he's not really truly a villain. He's just antagonistical in a sense of what the task force is trying to do. He's not a bad guy. He's very clearly a good guy. But what he's trying to do, trying to disrupt the task force, trying to disrupt what they're doing. Of course, we look at it from the audience's perspective. We know what they're doing. We know the good they're doing. We think of him as a bad guy, but in reality, what he's doing is not exactly the most awful thing. If we found out in our real world that the FBI had been working with some awful criminal for several years, we would probably be a little concerned as well. So I kind of feel like they're doing an interesting thing where they're presenting him in such a negative light, villain light almost. But in reality, he's not exactly wrong. He's not exactly the evil person in this scenario. In fact, he is probably one of the least corrupt people in the show that we've seen so far. So it's another interesting thing. But with all that being said, that's it for this episode. So on to the final of these three. I'll see you there in just a minute. And now episode 18, Wormwood. So this one was pretty straightforward, and again, maybe it's just coming at it from the mindset of somebody who's seen the Blacklist a lot, but it was pretty obvious. not right away, but they kind of tend to make it go a certain way when they write these stories. So they make it seem like it's one thing, but then it's not that. They make it seem like it's another thing, it's not that. And then whatever has been sort of around, especially whenever they write mysteries like this one, it's kind of, it's not the thing that is the most obvious. It's not the next thing that's most obvious. It's the one that has not really been discussed as a possibility until near the end. And that's pretty much how it went. From the beginning, my mindset was, well, maybe it's Reddington that did this. And then about halfway through, he's like, this is what I wanted. Obviously, I didn't want to kill anybody, but this is how I wanted things to turn out with you two in charge. I'm like, okay, well, that makes it look like it's him, so it's clearly not. And then they bring up the one guy that didn't show up. I'm like, well, that's too obvious, so it's not going to be him. And then the girl, Gabriella, was there from about halfway through the episode, and nobody was really talking about her. Nobody was really bringing her up. I'm like, okay, so she's responsible. The only question was why. And of course, they mentioned Romeo and Juliet, so my mind was on that sort of train of thought. And when it was that simple, I'm like, well, okay, I guess he sort of just gave us all of the answers right there. That's kind of boring, a little bit. I mean, I'm kind of glad that the guy, after she told him what she did and why she did it for them, I'm kind of glad they didn't just go, "Oh, you love me that much." Yeah, I'm very certain that most people in his situation would go, "You're crazy." So it was kind of a nice little funny moment there at the end for me, at least, just to see him go, "Yeah, you're worse than they ever were." Um, but no, I think overall it was okay. I was not a huge fan of the mystery in this one. Again, pretty straightforward, pretty obvious in my opinion. And then you've also got the other side of this story, which is what Hudson's trying to do, trying to get Wrestler's sponsee, whose name escapes me now, trying to get him to spy on Wrestler. And for one, it does paint Hudson in a little less than stellar light. And so far, he's not been willing to push that sort of line. Granted, it's not like he's sitting there saying, "Hey, spy for me. You have to do this." He is convincing this guy to do it, but it still feels like it's maybe stepping a little bit over a line that so far he's not really been willing to cross. Maybe that's showing that he's getting desperate, that he's willing to break that Narcotics Anonymous line. Maybe that's what they're trying to show here. But it definitely, it paints him in the less than stellar light, and it also paints this guy who has not had really much to do with the story at all. He's not really been involved. And now all of a sudden it's, oh, he's just here because he can get close to Wrestler. He's close with Wrestler. Wrestler's been helping him. And now Hudson is basically using him to spy and find out what the task force is doing. Which, of course, I don't think Wrestler's ever going to give up anyway. But I don't know. For me personally, again, now Hudson is kind of crossing a line that doesn't need to be crossed with the whole sponsor situation that's going on here. And now this guy, he's kind of, I mean, he flipped way too quickly. If this took some time, if maybe Hudson had reached out to him before, or even if maybe he was a plant from the beginning, I don't know, just something that made him either more likable or less likable. Because right now, I wanted to like him, but this moment made him extremely unlikable with how quickly he switched and decided, you know what, I'm gonna ask Wrestler this question, and he gave me an answer that kind of coincides with what this other guy is telling me, so I'm gonna flip on him. I'm gonna get this information for him. And to say it's for his benefit, that doesn't that doesn't really justify anything. That doesn't justify his actions. But if you had made him less likable, maybe he was a plant this whole time, it would be a better plot twist, but also I feel like you wouldn't have had that feeling of, oh yeah, this guy's trying to do better. You wouldn't have cared about this guy at all. But to make us care about him, to make this whole story with him and Wrestler pretty a pretty good story for the most part. Yeah, it was on the side, so it didn't seem all that interesting to begin with. But it was a nice story, and it was a good moment for Wrestler after everything he's been through to help this guy get past his narcotics addiction. I thought it was a good story for that. And to now flip it and make it a weak point, a moment of, oh, this guy is now just going to basically betray wrestler because, oh, it's for his good because this other guy says so. That is just, it's not strong enough. It's not a strong enough story to really get me to feel like, oh, I feel so bad for this guy. No, I kind of hate him now because he's he's got to put a bit more trust in wrestler. You know, if you truly care about him, you truly see him as a friend, you truly, after everything wrestler's done for you, you're just gonna go flip on him just like that. No, that you're losing any sympathy points you had. You're kind of becoming one of the most hated characters in the season now, and that's just disappointing because there's a lot more potential to work with there, in my opinion. But again, going back to Hudson, I mean, for him, this is of course his foot in the door, but at the same time, I don't know if he just expects wrestler to sort of blindly trust this guy and be like, oh yeah, let me tell you all about this operation. I can't imagine he would do something as shady as put a bug on him or something like that. But I don't know. Again, maybe he's getting more desperate, so he's willing to cross a couple of lines that he wouldn't have originally because he realizes they're willing to cross those lines, and if he doesn't, he won't get the answers he's looking for. If they show that, then I feel like that would be a bit more of a natural turn for him. But I do wish it happened maybe over a few more episodes. I just feel like he's suddenly kind of becoming a lot more focused very quickly. And again, the idea that he's willing to cross lines that he wasn't originally would make more sense if he had tried a lot of other avenues, but really he only tried the one with Senator Dwarf, and after that whole thing fell apart. Now all of a sudden it feels like, well, that didn't work, so now I gotta try to work this one guy who's in NA with wrestler, and maybe that'll work. And that it's just not a good progression of his character. It feels like he was up here, and instead of a slow descent, it just kind of plummeted, and now he's working down here a little bit shady and not exactly a likable way to take things on. But anyways, all that aside, the stuff with Reddington and deciding to leave the room and all that, that was something else that I just kind of found a little stupid. You know, like, I kind of agreed with Cooper, and even then at the end, whenever he gave his whole explanation about wanting to find some light in the world and Agnes's performance was that for him and all of that, it still just felt kind of ridiculous to me. You know, I thought it would have been better if we found out maybe he didn't touch one of the plates, or maybe he, because he knew Wormwood was such a possibility for him in the future, maybe he trained his body, you know, as ridiculous as that sounds, like the whole Princess Bride moment, you know, where he trained up his body to be immune to the poison. Something like that. It would sound ridiculous, but it would at least give us a reason why he was just so gung-ho. You know, because his plan's not finished yet. I'm pretty sure we are reaching a point where he's about to finish everything he's trying to do. He's trying to, I think, disband everything he set up with his organization. He's trying to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands by dismantling it from the inside. And I think he's doing all this because he realizes he is on death's door. I think we're gonna find that out probably pretty soon. That's my guess. But that doesn't mean that he's willing to just go, oh, I could die. Oh well. Like, that's not, he has a plan that he wants to get done before he dies. So yeah, you can say because he knows he's gonna die soon, if Elizabeth was still alive, you know, if the plan was in place for her to take over, if he had all of that, I could see him being a little bit more carefree. You know, maybe he hasn't fully trained her up, but he knows that she's there. He knows that his organization will fall into her hands and that she'll have enough to work with. So if he's a little bit more carefree at that point, that kind of makes sense. But when you have it where he's trying to set all this up and do all this stuff before he dies, and it's still not fully done, then it doesn't make sense for him to be so gung-ho, knowing that he might die from this. Like, I don't feel like that fits in with what we've seen so far this season. So I just felt like it was a pretty lazy excuse. And again, I think it would have made more sense if he knew about Wormwood and did something to counteract it, or maybe he didn't touch a plate. Once he realized he didn't touch a plate, then he was like, I'm good, or just anything along those lines, but not just I just wanted to see Agnes's play that bad that I was willing to die. Well, that's just stupid. I'm sorry. I realize you made a promise to be there. I realize that this is important to you because Agnes is important to you and all of that. I get that. There's going to be another play. I guess maybe not for him if he knows he's dying soon, but I don't just tell Cooper, hey, can you get a video of this for me? I can't be there now for this, but just something along those lines, not just, let me put at risk everything that I've been doing this whole season just to go see her play. Maybe they'll rectify it in the next episode. Maybe we'll find out that I don't know, his body's failing anyway, so that wouldn't have done much I'm just a little disappointed with how they've handled certain elements of the past few episodes. But we only have, 4 episodes left now? It feels like they're building up toward a climax with Hudson pretty soon. I don't know if he's going to be the final thing to go up against in the final episode or not, or if it's going to be they manage to stop him and then the final episode is kind of more of an epilogue and showing everything Reddington's been trying to do this season. But I think so far I'm still engaged. I'm still interested to see where it's going to go next. I just feel like the writing has not quite been as strong this season as it was for our whole story last season. I feel like there was a lot better narrative writing, a lot better character writing last season. Yes, the Blacklisters were not as interesting for the most part, but it was still a cohesive narrative that I feel like was expertly pieced together and kept me on the edge of my seat. Whereas this season, the overarching narrative has felt a little sloppy. It feels like there are moments when they had the whole thing with Wu Jing, which was set up pretty well, and it was kind of fun to see the different moving pieces. But now that that's been done, everything to do with Hudson, it kind of feels like it's been sort of rushed at points and then slowed down at points. It feels like they're not really pacing it very well. And again, the Blacklisters, for the most part, have just not been super interesting this season. And honestly, probably, I saw the next one, pretty sure the next one doesn't have a blacklist number, so it's not going to be another blacklister that I know of. But yeah, we've not had that many blacklisters to speak of anyway. So it just feels like this season, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure if they just didn't have a plan coming into it or not, but it feels like this season has not quite been the real, I think, finale that I was expecting from it. I was really expecting it to all sort of culminate, some stuff from the past coming in, stuff with Liz and what she was doing, stuff with Katarina. I don't even think we've heard her mentioned. It just felt like that would be all coming together in this final season, and it feels like we've sort of been focusing on a bunch of other stuff. I don't know. I don't know why they haven't had more of a plan, but a little disappointed in some of what's happened, but maybe they'll change my mind. We'll see. But until then, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Blacklist reviews, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Till then, hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.